When I was in college, I watched this movie, The Butterfly Effect. It's a science fiction thriller that constantly keeps you at the edge, and the ending is left to viewers' interpretation. The movie is based on a very popular hypothetical situation called the butterfly effect, which illustrates how an initial small difference can result in massive consequences in the future. It comes from the analogy that even the feeble flap of the wings of a butterfly at one place can trigger a series of atmospheric events, which in turn may lead into a tornado in a place far away. Interesting, isn't it? It's actually part of a much broader concept in mathematics called the chaos theory, which has tons of research papers written on it. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. What amuses me more are those little things. You know, those little triggers like the flap of that wing of a butterfly, which has the potential to drive massive results over time. When the concept was presented to me as a movie, I found it new and mind blowing. I enjoyed every bit of it. But later, when I gave it a little more thought, I realized that the world is full of such examples. History is full of such examples. And in fact, our daily lives are full of such examples. You know, the little things that you do, the tiny habits that you form, the small decisions that you take can have massive results on our lives. Given a choice, we all would want to play these small things in the best possible way so as to reap the maximum benefits for the future, right? But often we do not realize which of these would be a trigger for the future. But at times we even know what they are. And at times we may hit the spot just by sheer dint of luck. It can be about instant gains as well. For instance, I started mentoring people on a daily basis a few months back, when the COVID lockdown had started. I use a scheduler tool where people can browse the empty slots on my calendar, click and directly book a call with me. So the first 1 or 2 months were very smooth. I would get on a call, speak to them, and all went nice. But after that, I observed a pattern. I saw that every week there would be at least 2 or 3 cases where the mentee wouldn't turn up for the call even though it is scheduled on their calendar. A little bit of retrospection led me into knowing that the tool that I was using, the scheduler, it has by default let the users book slots on my calendar for a duration of 2 months in advance. And since the slots were really getting filled fast, when anyone came to that scheduler page, they would at best find a vacant slot which was 2 months away. So which means by the time their date arrived, of the date of their appointment, the very reason why they wanted to get on a call with me probably would not be valid anymore. And hence, the no-shows were happening. Once I figured this out, the solution was simple. I went to the settings and I changed it so that people could book a slot with me only up to 1 month in advance and not 2. After that, the number of no-shows has considerably reduced. Of course, there are a few genuine cases, but it's certainly not a pattern anymore. Now it may seem like a very small and trivial thing, but imagine this happening every week. It does affect you. And by doing that small thing to fix it, saved me a lot of mental space. At times, this impact can be seen over a large number of people, say the population of an entire country as well. A few years back, there was a widespread nutritional deficiency in Cambodia where more than 50% of the people were affected with certain kind of anemia. The pregnant women, especially living in the rural areas, were the worst hit. There were increased number of cases of premature labor with newborn babies born with underdeveloped brains. Now this was a big problem. And all these even led to a GDP loss of over $70 billion every year. The authorities found out that it was happening due to the deficiency of iron in their diet, and one simple yet effective solution was to use cast iron utensils, cookware made of cast iron. When food was cooked on these, the utensils would release a certain amount of iron into the food, which would take care of a significant part of the recommended iron an individual would need. But here was the problem. The solution was not very feasible because changing all the cookware at somebody's house is an expensive affair, especially for people living in the rural areas. So the authorities figured out a cheaper alternative. They instructed everyone to drop a small piece of cast iron into the vessel while cooking their food. A small cast iron disc or something like that. Now, this would have the same effect as cooking food in cast iron utensils. Simple, right? Smart. But the only problem was nobody did it. Because no one really understood the significance of this seemingly unwanted step into their cooking process, so they conveniently ignored it. Now, this brought the authorities back to their drawing boards because it was a big problem and they had to solve it. And this time, they again came back with a suggestion. Another piece of cast iron, but this time the shape of it was that of a fish instead of a disc. And they also gave it a name, the lucky iron fish. Guess what? It became so popular overnight that everyone wanted to have the lucky iron fish with them. I mean, come on, who wouldn't want a bit of luck into every meal that they eat? So was there anything lucky about that fish? Not really. Yet it worked like a charm by convincing everyone to introduce a seemingly unwanted step into their process of cooking. Later, it was discovered that iron deficiency was not the primary cause of the anemia that was rampant in Cambodia, and our lucky iron fish could only supplement the dietary iron. So it didn't completely wipe out anemia, but yet it's amazing how that small idea could change the behavior of a large number of population, just like that. Speaking of behavior, there are also instances in the history where people have gone above and beyond to build a behavior. After World War II, many Western companies were flourishing in Japan. Everyone wanted to introduce their products in Japan and they were doing really well. But Nestle, as a company, was struggling with its flagship product, coffee. They seemingly built a wonderful product, priced it well, and did everything else right that was needed. Yet the sales were simply not picking up. No amount of promotions or marketing or advertisement helped because people were still not buying coffee. That's when Nestle as a company decided to do a stimulus experiment with the people of Japan. The result of the experiment revealed that the Japanese people didn't have any association or memory or emotions associated with the coffee drink. Why? Because Japan as a country prefers to have tea and they have been doing it for thousands of years. Coffee is a recent foreign phenomenon and not everyone is quite acquainted with that. So no matter how much they tried, they were not able to build an association with coffee. Also, it had a burning smell and taste which didn't really invoke a positive feeling in their minds. So here's what Nestle did. They planted a very small seed into the minds of an entire generation. As a long-term strategy, they started manufacturing coffee-flavored candies. Yeah, candies. And they started marketing them to the children in Japan. So that the children already get acquainted to the taste of coffee because they were having those candies and also associate pleasant memories with it. So that when they grow up and start consuming beverages, coffee would be a natural choice for them. And guess what? It worked. Today, the Japanese love their coffee as much as they love their tea, and it wouldn't have been possible if that small seed wasn't planted into the minds of one of the generations. It's a perfect example of catch them while they are still young. It amazes me and amazes me even more as a designer because that's what I do. I build behaviors with the experiences that I design, and at times, things can happen in the most unexpected but pleasant way. Well, speaking of design, I'm sure you must have heard of stories which says that by changing the color of a button on your website, you can increase the sales by multifold or something like that. I've heard them too, but honestly, I do not know how true they are. But I personally have experienced similar instances in my career as well. I work for a food tech company. We have an app using which people can order food from restaurants nearby. Hyperlocal services, essentially. A few months back, we observed a pattern. A problem, actually. There were many requests of orders for cancellations because people had placed order at wrong locations, at wrong addresses by mistake. And needless to say, cancellation of orders cost us money as an organization. For any hyperlocal services, the delivery address is one of the most important things because that decides a lot of other things, like what are the restaurants that you will see when you open, because not every restaurant is serviceable everywhere. It depends on the delivery address that you choose. And that is why, even in our UI, the delivery address is right there at the top of the page in a very prominent spot so that the user sees it the first when they land into the page. But that's not how the users think. When users come to our app, they're usually hungry. And the thing that they have in their mind is food and not address. And rightly so. Hence, they were not seeing the address even though it was in one of the most prominent places right at the top because they never bothered thinking about that. While GPS does a good job at finding the location, but it's still not perfect, especially in indoor conditions. And most of our users would be using the app while they're indoors. So maybe all the cancellation requests that we were receiving were probably cases where the GPS couldn't find the location of the user. Possible. We do have an algorithm which predicts the location of the user in case there are no signals from GPS, but let's admit it. No matter how good an algorithm is, it can never completely understand what is in the minds of the user. So the problem narrowed down to how do we direct the attention of the user towards the address even if it's for a very short time so that they can go and correct it in case it's wrong. Here's where we have introduced a very small thing. We started showing the address right in the splash screen. That is the moment you tap on the app icon. And after that, we have an animation, a follow me animation that would guide the eyes of the user towards where the address finally goes and sits at the top. So that in case they want to, they can always tap and go and change it in case the address that is automatically fetched is wrong. We are yet to know the results of the feature that we have shipped, but the initial results are very promising. We often reach a stage where life gives us choices which seem equally good. I was in that position 6 years back. I was a student in an engineering college and I had job offers from 2 companies in hand. 2 very different companies but equally promising offers. I was sitting in front of the placement portal. I was just 1 click away from triggering the future that I am in today. I looked at them, said my prayers, and accepted one. At times I still sit and think, what would have happened if I had clicked the other button or if I had accepted the other company? Maybe I would never know what working for a large multinational company means. Maybe I would never realize that working at the Indian back office of an American company isn't really my cup of tea. Maybe I would never meet the lady who's my wife today. Or maybe I would never gather the courage to switch my career to design, and that too at a startup. Or maybe I wouldn't be speaking in front of you guys today in this platform. Small things are powerful, extremely powerful. So next time in your life, when you encounter a situation that makes you feel that this could be a trigger, think of this talk maybe. Thank you, everyone.